This is Tito Santana, and I'm just about to do an interview with Hannibal TV. Arriba!
This is Hannibal here from thehannibaltv.com, and today, as my special guest, I have WWE Hall of Famer Tito Santana, former WWE Intercontinental Champion. He's wrestled for the AWA, he's wrestled everywhere, which we're going to get into throughout the course of this interview. One of the wrestlers that's aged the best over the years. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing very good. It's a pleasure to be here with you, and thank you for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I don't know if you remember it too well, but you did wrestle for me once many years ago against Jim Neidhart in Alberta.
I do remember that. We didn't have a good turnout.
Yeah, and it wasn't exactly one of your matches with Savage either.
No. Oh, Neidhart wasn't a smooth worker.
No. It's unfortunate he passed. I guess I may as well ask you about it now. Any memories of Jim Neidhart better than that night? Because I think that night he headbutted you in the balls or something off of you were trying to do a leapfrog, and I think he nailed you in the balls.
Yeah, I just think, you know, the Anvil was battling, with pain pills and stuff like that. That he was, and sometimes he wasn't all there, And I think that was one of the nights where I don't know what the deal was. I didn't ask him, but he wasn't the same Anvil that I had known in the past.
Now, as far as your athletic career, I believe you started off as a football player when you were in your youth. Is that right?
Yes, I did. I started playing football in Texas when I was a freshman in high school.
And you became recruited to West Texas State, a university known for its wrestlers who played football, I guess.
Yes, I did. And, Terry Funk played football there, and so did Tully Blanchard and uh, Million Dollar Man, Manny Fernandez. I mean, there was a whole bunch. I'm sure you know. The list goes on and on.
Were you on the same team as any of those guys at the same time as they played?
Me and Tully Blanchard and the Million Dollar Man played during the same time.
Okay. I had a fan that told me to ask you, I guess there was something that happened between you and Ted DiBiase in the parking lot, I guess, back in those days.
Not that I ever remember.
Oh, okay.
No, I mean,
Okay.
that's just a rumor.
What are your thoughts on everything going on with Ted now? I guess there's a big scandal for, I guess, his ministries accepting several $1 million worth of money that was meant to go to help feed the poor.
Well, I don't know if it's true or not, but if it's true, you're using the Lord's name to get ahead, and then something like this happens. To me, I don't have a lot of respect for something like that. It's how much money is enough? I mean, why do you have to rob from people to further yourself?
Any favorite match with Ted over the years? I know you worked with him a lot.
Well, as the wrestling world knows, DiBiase was one of the best heels in the business. I pretty much enjoyed every match that nothing stands, uh, on my mind right now. When I switched to become a Matador, I was supposed to come out with a big angle with him, and then it was dropped. I would have loved to have had a feud with Ted, because both of us would have been you know good workers, and we would have done good in a feud.
Definitely. And I guess from there, you ended up being recruited to the CFL where you played for the BC Lions up here in Canada.
Yes, I was a free agent with the Kansas City Chiefs, and I spent 10 weeks there, and then I got cut, and then I ended up with the BC Lions, and I spent the rest of the year in 1975 and played pretty much the whole year in 1976, and I was supposed to go back, but I got into wrestling and just never went back.
How was the pay for the Kansas City Chiefs at that time, even though it was only 10 weeks? Now that would amount to a lot of money, obviously, with the salaries these days.
Well, back then, it was a lot different. I signed a contract for $18,000 for the year, which and there were some guys that were making less than I was. If you were making $100,000 there, then that was a lot of money.
And for CFL, I'm guessing the pay wasn't great either if you ended up going into wrestling instead of continuing on with football.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I did get the first year full year, I had a $20,000 a year contract, which it was up from Kansas City, but it's a brutal sport, and to be making that kind of money, and then I started wrestling and started making the same kind of money, and knowing that a wrestler's career lasted a lot longer than a football player's career, it was an easy decision for me to make the decision when I, stopped playing football and went into wrestling.
Were you recruited into wrestling by your fellow Texas or West Texas State alumni?
Yeah, yeah. Uh, Tully Blanchard's father and Tully Blanchard started talking to me my junior year, and I wasn't a wrestling fan. I never watched wrestling. I wasn't interested, but Joe Blanchard threw up some figures that were way more uh, potential than I would have had as far as playing football. And after I played my second year in football, after my first year, I told Tully I want to play one more year, and then I want to break in. My intention was to just do it uh, in the off season from football, but you know, if you're going to go into wrestling and if you want to make it, you got to go 100%. And once I went for it, I decided to stay with it.
I see. And what was the training like in those days to be a pro wrestler? I know it was usually a very protected business, but I imagine if Tully and his father recruited you directly, that maybe it would have been a little easier for you to break in.
Well, it was a little easier. I was trained by Hiro Matsuda. Hiro Matsuda. I went to Florida. Me and Tully went to Florida at the same time. He had already been wrestling, so he just jumped in and he was on the card. Well, I was just learning. I was just working out in the ring with Hiro Matsuda, and Barry Orton was also working out. So Barry Orton's father got in the ring with him and I. So uh, I really didn't really get smart until a few workouts, but luckily the fact that Terry Funk knew me and Tully Blanchard, uh, uh, Hiro Matsuda kind of took it easy on me compared to what I heard that he did with some of the other guys.
There was the rumor that he actually broke Hulk Hogan's leg, but we have heard over the years that Hogan tends to exaggerate things. Do you think that the leg was actually broken, or was it more of a maybe a sprain or something like that?
I don't think, I don't know, but I never heard at the time that anybody's leg was broken. So but I wasn't there, so
Right.
who knows? But I don't think it was broken.
Because Lex Luger was also trained by him, and I think Luger said similar to you. Well, the cardio and the squats and everything was tough. He wouldn't really rough you guys up too much if he respected you.
Yeah, the training was tough. Luckily I was an athlete, and I knew that to make it in professional sports, you had to earn it and pay the price. Back then, if you broke in, you earned the right to be a wrestler.
Did you work in Florida at all before you went back down to Southwest Championship Wrestling?
Uh, I never went back to. I never wrestled for Tully Blanchard in Texas. I
Okay,
I ended up having about 4 matches, and then I went to Atlanta from there. Uh,
okay.
and then I started working pretty much regularly after about, let me see, I'm going to say 2 or 3 months. I was in Atlanta on the card, learning.
Now, Bruiser Brody was another West Texas State alumni. Did you ever run into him at all when you were working the circuits?
The only time I wrestled with Bruiser Brody, and I was in the AWA, and by that time I had, pretty good experience, and I was able to, take care of myself in the ring a little bit. Uh, you know, he was from West Texas State. I was from West Texas State, and he was a scary looking guy, and we were in the middle of the card, and I enjoyed working with him. He was over big time, but I think he was over big time in Japan more than anywhere else.
And you mentioned you worked the Atlanta territory. That was one of the bigger territories at the time. How was your experience there?
Well, it was on fire, and I was just learning. And what I tell a lot of the young guys now is I was able to uh, I was able to, every night that I wrestled, I was wrestling with somebody that was better than me, and they were always teaching me, and they were, I was learning from the guys. And I mean, you had Dick Slater, you had wrestling too, you had, the Heels, the Anderson brothers, you had Dunker Noodle, Macho Man. We were underneath cards, and we were able to, teach each other quite a bit and learn. And we were making a lot of mistakes because all of us were kind of pretty wet behind the ear, but we were learning pretty much every night. For me, they were better than me because they had more experience than me, so I was learning from them.
And I guess Ole Anderson probably would have been booking at that time.
Ole Anderson and Gene, his brother, were the bookers.
How did you get along with them? I've heard mixed
Uh,
reports.
you know, I have no respect for Ole. I can't stand him. He didn't know how to treat people right. He was kind of made racist remarks towards me and Mexicans, and you know he he knew the power that he had as a booker, and I think he abused it. I never really cared for him.
When you say racist remarks, what type of remarks, for instance?
Well, just come out right and call you, "Hey, Mexican, come here," or
Oh,
like,
so I
um,
guess that may
I,
have soured your experience.
yeah, yeah.
Did you ever confront him over that, or was it more he's the boss? And in those days, I guess, unfortunately, that was more acceptable talk than it is today.
Yeah, no, I just accepted the fact that he was the boss, and and I was learning. I wasn't gonna uh, I wasn't gonna burn the bridge where I was working at. I was still getting the opportunity. I was still making a living, and I knew that I was gonna get some experience there. I just like I knew Tully Blanchard, but Tully Blanchard went one way and I went another way, and we were never in the same territory. So I just knew as an athlete, if you work hard enough, you climb the ladder, and that was my intention the whole time.
When you were training with Tully Blanchard and knew him in his younger days, was he already the partier that he later gained the reputation for being like a big time guy on the party scene in wrestling?
I no, not in. I didn't know Tully. I didn't hang out with him. He was a heel back then. The business was protected. So I didn't hang out with Tully, so I had no idea what he was doing. But I wasn't even traveling with him when I was in Florida. I was in the ring and he was, out on the road, and it just I didn't hang with him.
I understand that the Junkyard Dog was one of the wrestlers you did hang out with a little bit in the earlier days. Is that true?
Yeah, I mean, I met Junkyard Dog. I think it was my second trip to Atlanta, Georgia. I went from Atlanta to North Carolina to Amarillo for a couple of months. Then I came to New York. Then I went to the AWA, and then I went back to Atlanta. And JYD was already a big star in Louisiana, and he came into the Omni. And when I first met him, I mean, he was a very nice guy. And all of a sudden, I started getting booked in Louisiana, and he would pick me up at the airport, and he would drop me off. Never complained. He would give you the shirt off his sleeve, and I was very appreciative of JYD and the way he treated me and all the wrestlers.
Do you think if he had kept his act together behind the scenes a little bit better, he could have been a star nationwide on a similar level to Hulk Hogan? Because I understand he was that big of a star in Bill Watts's territory.
And when I was going to Bill Watts, every arena was sold out. Uh, he without a doubt, if he would have kept it together, he would have been as big a star as there is. I wouldn't doubt it if they wouldn't have put the world title on him. In New York. I mean, he was over, and he got over big time in New York also. I mean, he could talk, and he had charisma coming out of the yang yang.
And you mentioned that you were also in the American Wrestling Association. What was your experience overall like wrestling up there for Vern Gagne?
Well, Vern Gagne, I found it. You could live like a normal life. You didn't wrestle every night. You'd wrestle maybe 200 days a year. In the summer, business was slow, so he wouldn't run too many shows, and you could have a normal life. He'd run a big show, and there'd be only 5 matches, but every match every match could have been a main event all over the country. He had nothing but top stars there, and the fact that I was around all these top stars, I learned in the ring, and I learned how to do interviews, just by listening to the guys talk.
Who were some of your favorite opponents from those years in AWA?
Well, my first angle in the AWA was against Ednan Al Qaisi. We did an angle. He had a girl that would come out and dance with him, and uh, do the whatever dance they do, and we ended up doing an angle, and that was a great experience. That was the first time that I was involved in a feud, and I realized, when you're in a feud, you have something to talk about. It makes it a lot easier when you do your interviews. Like it's a shoot, it's like a reel. You're talking about, almost like a fight, and it was a great learning experience. But I mean, I wrestled against John Studd. I wrestled against I think Baron von Raschke was a heel at some point. Uh, Dino Bravo. I mean, and then me and Rick Martel ended up teaming up, and we went against the high flyers. And I mean, we had some great matches, and you know, that was a great experience. Also, I mean, we had 1 hour matches with the high flyers, me and Rick Martel, and I learned a lot. There was a great, I had been in the business about 3.5 years when I got to the AWA, and it was a great experience for me.
Did you ever wrestle Mad Dog Vachon when you were in that territory?
No, no, Mad Dog Vachon was a baby face, and I mean, with a face like his, and the way he talked and the way he worked. I mean, but the people loved him. He was a heel all the way, but he was a legit. He could kick some butt. That guy.
Oh yeah, I've heard he has an undefeated bar fight record.
Yeah, I mean from what I understand, he wrestled in the Olympics,
Yes.
and he was legit, and he wouldn't back down from nobody.
Did you ever wrestle Jerry Blackwell?
Uh, no, I didn't get the honor of wrestling Jerry Blackwell, but there is another guy who was on fire. I got there and he was getting beat, all the time, and he would keep bragging undefeated, undefeated, and people started buying it, and all of a sudden, he'd get beat, but he'd keep saying that he was undefeated and never been beat, and all of a sudden, he gets over like Vern had a pretty great mind for the business, so he was over like $1 million.
And you mentioned that you had a shorter stint in, I guess it would have been called maybe WWF at the time. How was that experience?
Well, at the beginning, I had only been in the business. Here's a guy that came from Mission, Texas, population 14,000 people. Uh, After about, I would say, 3 years, I make my debut in Madison Square Garden. It was unbelievable feeling, and the talent was different. The wrestling was different. This was a big man territory. Bruno Sammartino was a powerful man, and he wrestled against huge heels that he went up against, and uh, you know to be able to wrestle in arenas, 20,000 people, 24,000 people in Madison Square Garden, Baltimore, huge arena, Philadelphia, huge arena, Washington D.C., Nassau Coliseum. I mean, anywhere else you didn't have those kinds of attendance, and to be wrestling in front of those crowds, was a great experience.
Was Billy Graham around at that time?
No, I met Billy Graham when I was first getting started in 1977. Uh, he was I think he was on his way to New York, if I'm not mistaken. But I was impressed with the body and the way his interviews were second to none.
Where did you first meet Andre the Giant? Because I understand you two were fairly close.
The first time I ever met Andre the Giant was when I decided to get into professional wrestling. He came to Texas and he was wrestling in San Antonio, and I had to referee his match. And I just, they didn't smart me up. Even as a wrestler, they didn't smart me up, and I was scared to death of Andre. But we became close. Then when I went to Atlanta and he flew into it, into Atlanta to do all the battle royals. He would do like 2 or 3 weeks of battle royals in Atlanta. Only told me to go pick him up at the airport, and I had a little Granada, and I picked him up, and I picked David Von Erich, who was about 6'6", 6'7", and Andre was in the front seat, and my little Granada had bucket seats, and Andre gets in the car and he leans back and he breaks my seat, so I ended up having to trade my car in. Uh, but if Andre liked you, he liked you. If he didn't like you, I mean, you'd know. And he liked playing cards with me, and I enjoyed playing cards with him. We played gin rummy or we played cribbage, and uh, you had to keep Andre entertained.
Did you ever go out with him to eat or drink?
Yes, I did. Yeah, but I didn't try to keep up with him.
What was the most you ever saw him drink in a sitting? Because we've heard many stories over the years.
Well, I didn't experience it, but I heard that he had 116 beers. But if you see him hold a beer, it looks like a shot glass, in his hands. I mean, his hands were like, I mean, they were like catcher's mitts, like a paw, and uh, he was a big man, and he drank all the time. From what I understand later on, Arnold Skolin in New York, I found out that the reason he was drinking so much is because he was in so much pain. I didn't realize, uh, what his body, the change of his body with the disease that he had was going through. But supposedly it was pretty painful.
Would they allow him to drink in the dressing room in those days? Would it be no big deal if he wanted to do that?
Yeah, yeah. Andre could do whatever he wanted to do. I mean, but I mean, the guy was a businessman. He always went in the ring. He was always there, and he always performed.
Is it true that he really held something against Big John Studd?
Uh, I I I just know for a fact that I remember we were doing the TV taping, and one of the top matches there was Andre against John Studd. They had a feud going on. The Giants. I from what I understand, I heard rumors. I don't know if it's true or not, but he wasn't too happy when John Studd started going in the ring. Climbing the top rope. Because up until then, Andre was the only one who ever climbed over the top rope. But man, I remember Andre, having the finish and chasing John Studd, and I mean John Studd would go through the locker room and he'd keep on running. He'd leave the building. No, he Andre wasn't anybody to mess with.
I understand that it was Andre that got you your job in the WWE for your long run that you had there.
Well, I was in. I started out in Georgia. I went to Charlotte. Then I went to Amarillo, Texas. That's where I went to college, and they, Blackjack Mulligan and Dick Murdoch promised me they were going to give me a big push and make me an intercontinental star. And when I get there, by that time I had been in the business, close to 2.5, 3 years, but I knew the business. And my first TV taping was against Stan Lane, and he was also coming in new, and Dick Mulligan wasn't there, and I believe Mulligan did want to give me a big push, but Dick Murdoch was a baby face, and he probably wanted to make sure that I didn't get over. So I go on my first TV taping, and he made me and Stan Lane go 10-minute draw, and I realized, I said, if they're gonna give me a big push, 10-minute draw on TV with an unknown, you know, it's not the way to go. I only lasted about 2 months there. And Andre came by. Uh, Again, like I said, Andre would come in and business would pop because he would start doing the battle royals all over the place. And by that time, I had become close friends. Whenever Andre would be around, he'd travel with me. I would pick him up at the airports. I would drive him around. I'd hang out with him at night. He even stayed in my apartment, and I let him sleep in my bed. Uh, I told Andre that I wasn't happy, that they were treating me like crap and lying to me, and I wasn't happy there. And I had no idea that him and Mario Savoldi gave him a tape, and he brought it to. He was on his way to New York. I didn't even know that, and he showed Vince Senior a tape of me. So, as you know, in this business is very hard to make it, but it's who you know. If you have somebody that has power and can help you, that's the easiest way you're going to make it. It's very hard to make it totally on your own because there's so many talented guys out there.
That's very true. And for Dick Murdoch being the booker and kind of squashing your promised push, we've heard that he was allegedly a member of the KKK and allegedly didn't like African American wrestlers. Do you think it may have been because you are Mexican that there was an issue, or was it just another reason, like he may just not have liked you for whatever reason?
No, I think the fact that if he would have given me a push and there were so many Mexicans, he was worried that I'd get over more than he was. That's what I see. Yeah, I never saw but Tony Atlas told me that he saw that he carried a card, a KKK card. Tony says, I don't trust him. I'll never turn my back on him.
Yeah, Rocky Johnson mentioned something about that to me too before he passed away. So it very well could be true. So when you finally got your big run in WWE with Vince Jr., were there any promises made to you when you came into that territory?
No, when I first came in, I came in with Vince Senior,
Okay.
and I was just happy to be coming in. Leaving Amarillo, Texas, where I was barely making enough money to pay the rent. I wasn't making any money. And then to come to New York and start making some pretty decent money and wrestling in big houses. He never made me any promises. He just gave me an opportunity, and uh, I climbed the ladder pretty soon. I was teaming up with Ivan Putski and got the tag team titles, and he just gave me an opportunity, and I ran with it.
I did an interview with Ivan recently. He seems like a fairly nice guy now, anyways. What were your experiences like being tag partners with him?
Well, I was smart enough to. Ivan was over so big. I was really, really young in the business. But when I got teamed up with him, it elevated my career right away. All of a sudden, I'm a world tag team champion with Ivan Putski. I'm at the same level as him, and I'm known all over the world in Japan and the Middle East. You know, I became a known commodity all over the place. Uh, he was the power. I mean, Ivan was a powerful guy. I was the wrestler. Usually I was the one that did the selling, and a lot of the guys would try to dig, so him and Ike would have problems, but I understood my position, and I would sell, and Andrew would he would make the comeback, and some once in a while he'd sell a little bit, but Ivan just didn't sell very good, so it was a lot easier for the heels to get more sympathy on me.
Were you working in that company when Vince Sr. passed away?
Yes, yes.
What was the atmosphere like between the time, like, as the crossover was happening from when Vince Sr. was in charge to Vince Jr. taking over? Was there some people thinking that it might not be a good thing that Jr. was taking over?
Well, yeah, everybody, everybody, you know, even the guys that became agents used to knock Vince Jr. He doesn't know what he's doing. He ran the magazines. He wouldn't allow the magazines in the locker room. He wouldn't allow the magazines in the building, other magazines. Well, nobody knew that he was going to start his own magazine. Uh, I was there when we found out that Vince Senior had gotten sick, and uh, he had a meeting. They brought all the wrestlers together, and he made an announcement that he was giving up wrestling, and Vince Jr. was taking over. And boy, did he take over! I mean, he took over that meeting, and we went from calling him Vinny to calling him Vince. There was nobody calling him Vinny anymore. He became our boss. Right there on the spot.
Was there some concern when Vince started moving into other people's territories that, for instance, if you're working with WWF at this time, maybe by jumping into other people's territories, you're going to get heat in the future if you lose your job or anything like that?
No, you know, at the time there were territories, right? I mean, and you worked for the guy. I was working for Vince, and I was loyal to Vince when I was in Atlanta. I was loyal to Ole as much as I hated him. I was going to do whatever I could to I never had a position to where I could draw some money, but you know, wrestlers are loyal to the hand that feeds you. Everybody was there. We kept hearing that the problem was Ole Anderson was the one that came into to one of the New York towns, and I think it was in Virginia somewhere, and he wrestled in one of his towns first. So then, everything was open. That if you come into my territory, you know, Vince had a plan. Ole didn't have a plan. Vince had a plan, and he must have had some big money behind him because we'd come into the locker room and okay, we're going into Minneapolis. We're taking over Atlanta. We're taking over Louisiana. We're taking over. It's like every 3 weeks we come in and we were going into a different TV area, and kept growing.
I see. Now, as far as you being a celebrity, obviously wrestling was big. You were popular in all the towns that you were working in. But when did you start to notice the national and international celebrity from working for the WWF?
Uh, Probably right before WrestleMania one. Right before WrestleMania one, we were drawing big crowds, uh, and it just exploded. It just exploded all of a sudden. Uh, like we were turning people away in all the different town. We were in California. It wasn't overnight. I mean, we used to go to LA, 20,000 capacity arena. We'd have maybe 1,500 people. But everybody worked hard, and uh, Pat Patterson. I think George Scott was the booker. They had great storylines, and it just kept going up and up and up. And I happened to be in a great feud during that time. I think it was '85 with Greg the Hammer Valentine. I mean, there was pretty much everywhere we went. There'd be 20,000 people inside the arena and 20,000 that couldn't get in. It was just unbelievable. I never saw anything like it, and probably will never see anything like that again.
How was Greg to work with as an opponent?
Greg was like a pit bull. I mean, he would just keep coming. He'd fight you and fight you and fight you, and you. I was lucky that I was in pretty good shape, and I would sell. But when it came time for me to fire back, I'd fire back, and he would take it. He would dish it out, and he would take it, and that's why people enjoyed our matches because we used to have some dog fights.
And he's told me firsthand he never liked doing jobs. Did you ever have any issues with him not wanting to put you over in any matches, or were you too close enough that it was never a factor?
Well, when he took the title, uh, I chased him for about a year and a half. I mean, we had all kinds of matches. Finally, ended up in the cage match. So we got the most out of that angle, and he knew that I was going to be getting the title back. But he never did a job for me. He would get disqualified. He would get counted out. He would, have outside interference. So we'd have all kinds of, gimmick matches. We had our Broadways. We had curfew in Madison Square Garden where uh, at 11 o'clock, the wrestling had to stop, so they had to stop our match because it was 11 o'clock. We came back in a no curfew match. So you're right. He didn't like to do jobs. When you would do jobs, it was knowing that, you were not being used right.
And of course, you had that famous match in London, Ontario, where I don't even think WWE holds events in that town anymore. But any memories of that cage match?
Uh, no, I honestly don't believe that I remember. The only cage match that I remember, and I know I had several cage matches, but the only one I remember was the one in Baltimore.
And is it true that your wife threw out the Intercontinental title that Greg Valentine destroyed?
No, it wasn't. It was me. I
Okay.
had I had it in my gym, the green Intercontinental title, and I had it for about 10 years, and it was just laying on the floor, laying on the floor, laying on the floor. And pretty soon I said, "Man, that's junk." And I mean, to have known what I know now, that that belt is very valuable. It probably rotted already, some junkyard, But I mean, that was. I bet you I could get $30,000-$40,000 for that now.
Oh yes, with the collectors because people buy replica belts for thousands.
Yeah, I mean, I kicked myself in the butt.
As far as your WrestleMania 1 match, you have the distinction of having the first ever WrestleMania match. I think you wrestled Playboy Buddy Rose under a mask. What was that experience like for you?
Well, Playboy Buddy Rose was a great worker. He was a little on the heavy side when he came there, but he could still move. Uh, I wasn't very happy that I was the opening match when I first walked into the arena because we didn't know the order of the matches, uh, and when or who I was going to be wrestling against. I was disappointed because at the time, me and Valentine had a real hot feud. We were selling out arenas without Hogan being on the card. And when I find out I'm in the opening match, not wrestling Greg, JYD was wrestling Greg. It was pretty disappointing to me. Right before I went through the curtain, uh, I have an attitude, not a good attitude. And then Vince comes up next to me and he says, "The reason you're number one is because I need you to go out there and get the people off their ass and set the tempo for the rest of the night." And right there, like my attitude changed. I had a different outlook of my position.
I heard you say in another interview that you were paid $7,500 for that match. Would that have been your lowest WrestleMania pay?
No, no. Well, I got 7,500, I believe, and I complained, and I got another 7,000.
Oh wow.
Yeah, I complained about my payoff because I wasn't happy, you know. So they ended up doubling my pay.
Because in those days, and I think it still works like this to a certain extent this day, you're also paid by where you are on the card. So opening match would have been lower than if you'd been mid card. So I guess that might have been one of the reasons you also would have been upset about being in the first match.
Yeah, and the payoffs weren't that big. I mean, Bundy was in the main event on WrestleMania, wrestling Hulk, and got $50,000. In the main event. I think WrestleMania 2, or well, I don't know which one it
Yeah,
was.
yeah,
You know, Hogan got I think Hogan got 500,000 and Bundy got 50,000.
I see.
It just wasn't fair.
What did you think about the celebrities being used, such as Cyndi Lauper and Mr. T?
Well, I don't think the wrestlers were very happy because we knew that the celebrities were getting more money than we were. You know,
Right.
and we didn't think that they were uh, drawing any wrestling fans. The wrestling fans didn't come see Mr. T or Cyndi Lauper. They were part of the show. And we didn't understand that. Now it became a spectacle and it became a show. Back then we just weren't accepting it.
And you had some matches with Dr. D, David Schultz. How was he to work with?
And he was another guy that was, you know, he would eat you up if you wouldn't fight back. So luckily I had experience and I knew how to sell, but I would fight back, and people saw that they knew that I was experienced, and uh, they would sell for me also. I never had a problem with him. He was funny because he was always coming in. I almost beat this person up. I almost beat this person up, and I would say, "Doctor, who did you beat up today?" And he always had problems. That guy.
Were you backstage when he had that incident with Ron Stossel?
Uh, I don't know what's happening to my phone, but I hope we're okay. No, I was backstage, but I didn't see it. I didn't hear anything about it until it was too late.
Okay. Yeah, there seems to be some feedback on the phone. Um, as far as your feud with Macho Man, that was one of your most memorable feuds. How was it to be in the ring with him?
Well, Macho Man was a great worker. I just wish we would have had a longer feud. I think they cut the feud short because they had bigger plans for Macho Man and Elizabeth. He got over so big. I think getting the IC title for me uh, put him way on top. Pretty fast. But he was a great worker. I mean, he was a pleasure to work with.
We've heard from guys like Ricky Steamboat, and I think even Hulk Hogan said it, that Macho Man liked to plan out his matches from start to finish. Was he like that with you, or were you guys more calling it on the fly?
Uh, the very one time in Pittsburgh, he came out with about 3 pages, and he forgot it, like he didn't come in with a lot of experience, Macho Man. He hadn't been used to working with the New York style. And, after the first time that he brought out the pages, for some reason we didn't use we didn't use any scripts. But I do understand that I remember he brought out a script, George Steele, and George Steele just took it and ripped it up and said, "I don't do scripts. I go out there and you let George do George stuff. You work his gimmick."
There was a fan that commented that they saw you wrestle Macho Man in Puerto Rico in 1985, and there was a rainstorm, and most of the crowd left because of the storm, but you guys still went out there and put on a five-star match. Do you remember that match?
Yes, I do. It was the first time that I had gone into Puerto Rico, and you know, I don't know if Vince was intending on taking over Puerto Rico, but uh, they were afraid that Hulk Hogan would get hurt, so they put on Hulk before intermission, and Hulk got on and wrestled and got the plane and came back, and me and Macho Man were on last, and we it was a very slippery ring, and it was pouring. I mean, you could barely see each other, but we did have a good match. We were very careful, but we had a good match.
Did you ever notice any of the unusual stuff backstage with Macho Man and Elizabeth over the years that we've heard Honky Tonk Man and other wrestlers tell stories about?
No, I never noticed it because he kept her away from our locker rooms. I know that he was very protective, and uh, but I never noticed. I'd be lying to you if I'd say I saw this or I saw that. I never saw anything. I know that you know I, I was always pretty polite to Elizabeth, and I never had a problem with Macho Man.
How was the backstage environment in WWE in the 80s? Because we've heard that there was a lot of cliques and sometimes there would be cruel ribs played and so forth.
Well, the dressing room was wrestling is a fraternity, as you know. I mean, you're part of it. No matter who you are, if you're a wrestler, you're part of the fraternity and you're accepted. Uh, but there were cliques, and the baby face would step a baby face if they could climb the ladder. Like a baby face, I'm considered a baby face. I wasn't competing against the heels, so I would worry about other baby faces stabbing me in the back. Same thing with the heels. The heels would worry about heels stabbing each other in the back, and there were some pretty brutal uh, ribs played. That were not very nice in a lot of cases. I remember, and I didn't even know who did it, but somebody chief had a son that was breaking in, and he was allergic to coffee, and put they cut one of his legs and he had to wear his jeans, one leg cut off, and they put the coffee in his pants, and you know, they would. I didn't think that stuff was very nice, but that's the boys.
That would have been probably the Bulldogs, I guess.
Yeah, I would imagine.
Did you ever witness any of the backstage fights? I think the Bulldogs had the one with the Rougeos when you were around, and I think Billy Jack Haynes was in one, and Danny Spivey, but I don't know if you were on those cards.
The only one that I was in, Dan Spivey and Adrian Adonis. We were in, I think we were in Peoria, Illinois, and I think Adrian Adonis was a bit of a bully, and he had been taking advantage of him and Mike Rotundo, and I remember Dan Spivey telling Arnold Skaaland, if he messes with me tonight, I'm going to knock him out. And Adrian Adonis was supposed to go over. So uh, Spivey did, he knocked him out in the ring, and Spivey went over the top rope and got disqualified. So that's how Adrian got his hand up, and then he came into the locker room and he walked right into it, and uh, Spivey just beat the living heck out of Adrian. I kind of felt bad.
How did you get along with Hulk Hogan over the years?
Pretty good. We started at the same time. We'd give each other advice at the beginning, and I mean, I was very lucky. I was in the territories that he was in, so wherever he was at, business got good, and business was on fire, and we got along great.
And what about the Ultimate Warrior?
The Ultimate Warrior didn't have too many friends. He got along with the Kerry Von Erich. He didn't respect the business. He got it. He was very not a good worker. He used to hurt guys and he made a lot of money.
You were in that Survivor Series finale in 1990 with the Warrior and Hogan. What was that experience like working with them?
Oh, that was a great experience. That was for me to be put in a 6-man tag with those two guys. To me it was an honor that'll last a lifetime.
Did you ever have any issues with Jesse Ventura calling you Chico, or was that something that you liked?
No, it was a work. It never bothered me. Jesse was over like $1 million by him calling me Chico. I knew that it helped my career.
I've heard Jesse say you were one of his favorite all-time opponents. What was your experience like wrestling him?
Well, I used to love to wrestle him because I mean he had great psychology in the ring. We used to work against each other and go about 10 minutes without even touching each other, and the fans were ready to come in and kill him. He used to know how to get heat. Which it's something that people don't know how to do anymore the way he used to get it. So it was nice, and he would never hurt you.
And it's safe to say he's one of the most successful wrestlers of all time for his political and movie careers. What are your thoughts on all of his success over the years?
Well, I think he was very successful because he was a very intelligent man, and uh, didn't back down from the promoters, and if he had something to say, he would say it to them. From what I understand, you know, God bless him. It's like the baseball players. People complain about the salaries. Well, obviously the money's there. So for Jesse the Body to get whatever he could, the money was there. You know, there was a few guys that weren't afraid to bark.
And they put you in a tag team with Rick Martel as Strike Force. Oh, there's some feedback. What were your thoughts on working as Strike Force with Rick Martel?
Well, I don't know if you remember, but he was teamed up with Tom Zink, and they were getting over pretty good. I forgot what they used to call them, but
Can-Am connection.
Can-Am connection. But all of a sudden, in the middle of the night, he picked up his bags and he left. And Vince came up and asked me if I would mind teaming up with Rick Martel, and they weren't doing anything with me at the time. So I said, of course, I don't mind. It would put me in the spotlight again, and I'd start making some decent money for a while again.
Have you been in contact with Martel at all lately? Because I've heard he doesn't want anything to do with wrestling anymore.
Yeah, I haven't talked to Rick in a while. I don't have any idea what. There's got to be something that went wrong for Rick Martel not to be in the Hall of Fame. Something happened between him and the office, and I don't know. Who knows?
And when you ultimately broke up with him and he became a heel, how did you like wrestling him?
I love wrestling him. He was a great worker. I mean, he was a night off, and he did a pretty good job with that model gimmick.
Is it true you wanted to be heel?
Yeah, before he came back, I asked Vince. I said, Vince, Rick is coming back. Is there any way that I can be the heel? And Vince says, no, you're going to be the baby face. I didn't realize that they had already planned this whole model thing probably for months, because he came back with, the model gimmick, and he was doing the interviews, fantastic. Rick was never a good interview guy, but all of a sudden he's doing a great job with the model.
And as far as your match with the Undertaker in Spain, what was that experience like?
Well, it was a great experience. I knew something was happening for me to go over against the Undertaker. I beat him, but Undertaker was a great worker. I mean, he never complained, and God, what a run he's had.
Yes. What do you think about his longevity as a character?
I think it speaks volumes of his work. I mean, I saw him work with Rey Mysterio, who's about 5'5", 5'6", and had great matches with the guy. Made the fans believe that there was a contest going on.
There was some issue with you and Shawn Michaels on an airplane. Could you tell us that story?
Yeah, I mean, uh, uh, I was sitting. I never forget. I was sitting on 4D. I don't know why I remember 4D, but it's the seat that I had. And I got up to get something out of my bag that overhead that I had to put like a couple of rows back. And then when I did whatever I had to do in my bag, Sean was sitting on my seat, and I said, Sean, that's the seat that I was sitting at. And the stewardess came over, and I told him, I said, I got up, and he sat on my seat. So they made him get up, and he ended up sitting right behind me, 5D. And all of a sudden I hear him saying, uh, he said, don't you ever talk to me that way again. And he said it twice, and I realized this. I said, are you talking to me? I turned around and said, are you talking to me? And he said, yeah. And I said, Sean, I said, I'll kick your butt. I said, this is not a work. I said, I don't know what you're talking about. This was my seat. And then he just got quiet. But we never had anything after that. He cooled off, and I cooled, I cooled off. But when I said, I'll kick your butt, he says, get in line. He knew that, he knew that all the guys hated him. He wasn't well liked. I think the more he matured, the more he became. I don't know. I left, so I don't know what happened with Sean.
Are you surprised that he got the big push that he ended up getting with all of those backstage problems? Because that wouldn't fly with pretty much anyone else.
No, I don't. I'm not surprised. The first thing is, he was very talented. You know, and he got a big push. At that time there were so many workers, so many great workers that they could have pushed anybody. But he was talented. And he got over like $1 million.
And as far as Scott Hall, I understand you came up with the Razor Ramon name. Is that true?
Well, I came out with Ramon because I was in the urinal in the bathroom, and uh, Razor said that him and Kurt were talking to Vince, and he runs through the door in the toilet, and I'm urinating, and he says, "Tito, I need a name that rhymes with Razor," and I said Ramon, and he just dashed out of the locker room and went and told Vince, and that's what it was.
Were you friends with Scott outside the ring, or was he just looking for you because you were Spanish and would probably have a good name?
Yeah, just looking for me because I was Spanish, and we respected each other. The boys were, even if you, I don't know if you have a brother, you might fight with your brother, but at the end, you respect each other, and it doesn't last forever. And there were some disagreements, but we were still like it's a brotherhood.
Did you ever work with Scott in the ring?
Uh, I had just a couple of matches. He was pretty stiff.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Was that in WWE when he was first coming in?
Yeah, I had to take his finish one time, only one time. Thank God, because he'd pick you up, backwards and all the way to the behind him, and drop you, on your neck, and that hurt. And I said, "There's no way I'm going to take it." If they would have asked me, I wouldn't have taken it again.
Is it true around the time that they made Bret Hart champion that you were also in consideration to getting that big push at that time, but for whatever reason, they ultimately chose Hart?
Well, uh, I was told Bruce Pritchard and Pat Patterson, a couple other guys told me that they were grooming me to be the world champion. And Pat Patterson says we're going to go into Mexico, South America, Spain. So they were planning on going over into all these Latin countries, and all of a sudden they changed their plans, and all of a sudden I'm out of the picture. So that's the way it went.
One thing I noticed is how quickly they kind of dropped you down the card where you were in a position basically just putting other people over and making other people look good. Was that kind of demoralizing because you've been used pretty well up until that point, and then your last year and a half, 2 years, it kind of changed?
Yeah, I mean that's why. Well, I don't know when the run with the Strike Force ran out, uh, but I did. Yeah, all of a sudden, and Vincent. I mean, I had been in the WWE longer than anybody else had, and Vincent told me, he says, Tito, your your career stays from the middle to the top. You've been up and you never go below. But at the end, all of my buddies, they had fired all of my buddies or let everybody go, and I was one of the last ones to last there, and I just wasn't happy, just making ends meet, so I was just ready to go.
Was there ever any contact with you in WCW after your WWE run ended? I know you worked for them a couple shots here and there, but what about a full-time deal?
Yeah, Vince Russo wanted to talk to me, but I told him I wasn't interested in going on the road anymore.
What about Eric Bischoff?
Uh, or maybe it was Eric Bischoff who they wanted me to come to Houston, and they were going to make me an offer, and I said, I'm not interested in going out on the road. I spent too many years on the road. I want to be home.
When
When
you
I left WWE, I was done. I mean, I didn't want to be on the road anymore.
when you did that one WCW shot, I think in Buffalo, New York, how was that experience for you, and how was the backstage environment compared to WWE?
Well, it was completely different. It was. I didn't think it was as professional as the WWE. Uh, it was a good experience. We worked against Jarrett, me and Snuka and George Steele, and we all beat him. And uh, it was good. It was. I got a good payday, and it was fun.
And speaking of snooker, last question here. What are your thoughts on everything that's come out in recent years about Snuka's allegations regarding his ex-girlfriend, I guess?
Well, I've been asked that many questions, and I can't answer that because I would be guesstimating. I don't know for sure. It's all hearsay, and I would hate to make an accusation that's not real. I mean, you hear a lot of rumors, and you hear different rumors, not the same ones. So I just I wasn't there. I can't tell you what happened, and who knows.
Were you in WWE at the time that happened?
Yeah, I came back. I came back the second time to the WWE, May 10th, 1983. That's the night it happened, and it happened. The reason I remember it was because it was my birthday.
Okay.
Yeah, that's how I remember that.
What
When I
was the re
when I woke up in the morning on the 11th, that's when I heard what happened. But nobody was saying it. It was like nobody was talking about anything about that.
and what was like nobody was talking? That was just the reaction. Nobody said anything. No one discussed it amongst each other. Because
No,
that would be a little shocking your first night in, and it's like,
right.
wow, something big happened.
Yeah, yeah, no, no, no. It was very quiet. Kayfabe.
And I guess because you were both baby faces, you probably never really worked with Snuka yourself in the ring.
Right. Yeah.
And if anyone wants to look you up on social media, do you have social media where they can follow you?
Well, Facebook, and if anybody wants to buy a Tito Santana book, you can go to Solis Merced uh, at yahoo.com and order my book. It's called Don't Call Me Chico, and it came from Jesse the Body Ventura. And I'm gonna. It's all Facebook, and uh, I post the link on Facebook often, and I'm going to be posting some T-shirts that I'm going to be selling, and different T-shirts they can order. And if they want a shout out, cameo shout outs, again, they can go to Solis Merced at yahoo.com, and or no, I think it's TitoSantana.com for cameo,
Well, thanks a
and
lot
and
for.
and, and TitoSantana.com for the book too. I think.
I'm sure that's a very interesting book. I might have to pick that one up myself and do another interview with you after I read the book.
Just order it. Uh, get the cheap one. There's one with a signature, and I'll sign it for you for the cheaper price.
Excellent. Sounds good. So that is at the link is on your Facebook page,
Yeah, it's TitoSantana.com.
TitoSantana.com. Okay.
It'll
Well,
come up.
thanks for taking the time to speak with us. Glad to see that you're still healthy, staying in shape. Do you have anything to say to the fans to close this off?
I just want to thank all the fans that are listening. I'm sure you have a great following. From what I understand, you're followed by, not too many people come close to you, but I want to thank the fans for always supporting Tito Santana. They never let me down. They were always behind me. And I think the feeling is mutual from what I hear. They always tell me about how I used to give it 100% every time, and gave them their money's worth. Arriba!
Thank you for watching the Hannibal TV. Please like this video if you enjoyed it and click the subscribe button to not miss any of our latest shoot interviews, match videos, or news updates. Support us on patreon.com for $1.99 a month to watch our full shoot interviews ad-free and help our channel grow. Follow us on Twitter at the Hannibal TV for instant updates.